A few weeks ago, I escaped to the Colorado mountains for a few days. Most mornings, I'd climb into the car with my dog Tommy and wander west. At times, I followed the Colorado River through Glenwood Canyon. Other times, I drifted farther into the mountains towards Basalt. Other times, I drove farther west towards ranch country. I wasn't headed anywhere in particular. The driving itself was the point. When I'm on vacation, I like to listen to memoirs by musicians and artists. This trip, I spent hours with Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. When a chapter ended, I'd switch over to the music, then back to the memoir, then to the music, memoir, music. For several days, Bruce rode shotgun across western Colorado with me. At one point, it came to a passage I found myself replaying over and over. Here it is. I was all I had. I had only one talent. I was not a natural genius. I would have to use every ounce of what was in me: my cunning, my musical skills, my showmanship, my intellect, my heart, my willingness, night after night to push myself harder, to work with more intensity than the guy next to me just to survive in this world I lived in. As I sat there in the black, I knew when we got back home there would have to be some changes made. I hit rewind. I was all I had. I had only one talent. I was not a natural genius. I would have to use every ounce of what was in me: my cunning, my musical skills, my showmanship, my intellect, my heart, my willingness, night after night to push myself harder, to work with more intensity than the next guy to survive in the world I lived in. I hit rewind again. I would have to use every ounce of what was in me: my cunning, my musical skills, my showmanship, my intellect, my heart, my willingness, night after night. I must have listened to those words 10 times. The passage stayed with me, not because it was about becoming a great musician. It was because Bruce wasn't simply describing talent. He was describing a way he wanted to inhabit his own life. He wasn't talking about musical ability. He was talking about bringing everything, every part of himself to the road ahead. That struck me because somewhere along the way, I realized that's what I want to do. I don't want to drift through my life. I don't want to hold anything essential in reserve. I want to bring my full attention to the people I love, the stories I write, the conversations I have, and to the whole mystery of being alive. At 60, that feels less like ambition than devotion. It's a way of fully participating in this life I've been given. As the Colorado River flashed beside me, I found myself thinking about another drive through these same mountains. It was July of 1982. I was 16 years old. My friend Steve was 15. We climbed into my Ford Fairmont Futura in Prairie Village, Kansas, and pointed it west towards Breckenridge. The dashboard rattled so violently somewhere out on the plains that it seemed like it might detach itself from the car entirely. But we didn't care. We were headed for the mountains. We spent the week hiking trails, camping beneath the stars, listening to Born to Run on a cassette that may well have been fused into the tape deck. Somewhere during the way, we convinced ourselves the album should become a Broadway musical. We spent hours around campfires inventing characters and scenes and plot lines, trying to determine where each song would fit into the story. We also spent an embarrassing amount of time talking about the girls who worked at the A&W. Looking back, what I remember most isn't the details. I remember the feeling. Life felt enormous. That trip quietly shaped the course of my life. I eventually became a journalist and an author. I spent years as an editor at Outside Magazine and later wrote for National Geographic, Adventure, Wired, Men's Journal, GQ, Travel and Leisure, and other publications. Writing carried me to Greenland, the Amazon, India, Indonesia, Israel and Palestine, the Arctic, and many other places. I spent time with monks and mystics and explorers and scientists, indigenous elders, athletes, and ordinary people whose lives changed the way I understood my own. For years, I was trying to understand how other people made meaning of their lives. Eventually, those questions became my own. They led me into memoir, into meditation, into relationships and heartbreak, into healing, into friendships, into daily practice of trying to become a little more honest, a little more awake, and a little more available to life. And that's where this podcast comes from. I don't think of The Seeker as a show about spirituality. I think of it as a place for conversations about the questions that shape a human life. Conversations with writers and psychologists and scientists, contemplative artists, and fellow travelers, people whose work has helped me understand myself and the world a little more deeply. My hope is that these conversations will do the same for you. And today I'm joined by my dear friend, Tamara Sattler. Tamara lives here in Boulder, where I live. She's a psychotherapist, a spiritual teacher, and one of the wisest people I know. We've been talking together about these subjects for years, and it seemed fitting that the very first conversation here on The Seeker begin with a simple question. Tamara, what does the word seeker mean to you?
The word seeker means to me being true and authentic to everything in my experience. So that's the real gestalt of it. So I'll give a little example. So I hung out at my friend's house just north of Boulder on the way to Lion, and I'm really attracted to that land. Now, can I afford a house there? No. However, that feeling I'm going to stay with. I reached out to my friend, real estate agent, to tell him that even if in 20 years, that's where I want to be. I reached out to my friend's mom and said, if you ever hear of a rental. So this is an example of something that I deeply feel connected to, desire. I feel more myself out there. So that's just a silly example of seeking.
I don't think that's silly at all. And I love that story. I think it reminds me of where I've landed. And I'm curious what you think about this. That after years of trying on different philosophies, different spiritual traditions, I see all of that as having been helpful and relevant. But where I've landed is in wanting to know how I feel and know direct felt experience. That's where the magic happens. And it's like it's getting out of concepts and thinking about stuff and relating to the world as it really is. Does that make any sense to you?
Absolutely. So I get curious. How do you feel right now? What is your somatic experience in your life? Maybe not in this moment, but if we snapshot at your life, how are you experiencing it? What's the felt experience?
Yeah, I think I just turned 60 this year. I turned 60 in February. And so far, this is shaping up to be an incredible year. It started out a little tough, but I think that I'm landing in this place of joy and a feeling like I feel that life has an end more than ever. And yet that has left me feeling inspired and joyful about creating. And I think maybe that's what I'm getting to. I have this deep felt sense that I want to create more in this coming decade than I maybe have ever had. And after a lifetime of writing, and here I am doing this podcast and having you as a guest. So, yeah, I feel joy. I feel creative. I feel life force moving through me more than ever. So, yeah, thanks for that question. How about you? How are you feeling?
Yeah, let me just comment on my experience. I so agree with you. And then the way that I would language it is I'm feeling more of you. And I have been for years. And it's a delight. It's really enjoyable. So that's how I language. And I love, you're such an amazing storyteller and writer. Your words, even opening up this, other people do not have the language or the description or the feeling to give me the feeling and the somatic experience. So I'm all about your creativity, all about your journey, your adventure, and you being more of yourself fully.
I think I spent years as a journalist, and that way of life, while exciting, I was writing about other people, writing for magazines and trying to please editors. And I think I'm doing less of that work now and more writing from this felt place. And it feels it's part of the healing journey in a way. Healing just meaning becoming more whole. And I think that was a part of me that was having to play a role earlier in life. And we have to do that to get ahead in life. But I feel much freer now to bring more of me and relate to other people in the world. So I appreciate that. Thanks for that comment.
So you were asking about my seeking journey.
Yeah.
So I think in spiritual terms, I think where I've gotten really lost is my seeking was always just in the spiritual realm for some reason, or at least that's how I languaged it. And now I feel that there's not so much an outward seeking. I guess it's more of an internal seeking. So it doesn't even feel like a seeking. It almost feels like now I have enough of a foundation where I can play in the seeking. I think prior, it felt like a life or death sentence. If I didn't find something about the world, me, my upbringing, then I wasn't going to be okay. And now I like to dance more in the seeking with a spiritual feeling of being found, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
No, I love it. I love that you're feeling found, but also not needing that to fit into any particular concept. I think that for me was a bit of a trap of trying on different spiritual practices and lives and just never quite feeling like I arrived there. And it's a frustrating less than feeling. And when you finally, let's all be honest with ourselves, there's some great spiritual traditions and religious traditions, and they mean a lot to a lot of people. And I'm sure that those people who find meaning in those places are finding themselves found in those places too. For me, I just have never landed in a place where, yeah, this is really the answer. This is going to solve all of my suffering. This is going to solve the problem of sickness and aging and death. Nothing has spoken to me in a way that just says this is the answer. And I think when you accept that, when you accept that there's a big question mark and we can dance in that place like you're talking about and dance in the mystery of I like to listen to Terrence McKenna, his talks. He's long dead now, but he talks about how we have this illusion, I think, that science is on its way to solving all of these problems. So now with AI, AI is going to figure everything out. And he just makes the point that the mystery recedes every time we take a step forward, the mystery recedes another step. We'll never fully understand what's going on here. And I love that, for example, there's this electromagnetic radiation happening all around us. And we know that now, but 100 years ago, they didn't know that. And it's real. And so, what don't we know now that's surrounding all of us as part of being in this universe that won't be ever discovered, or maybe will be discovered in 100 years? Anyway, that's kind of getting far afield, but that feeling of just accepting the questions, living the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're bringing up another really good point. So, not needing to have certainty, right? So, someone like me doesn't really need certainty. That's actually something that I was born with. But for a lot of people need certainty. And then someone like me, I have to be careful of my fantasy, right? So I think we all can get stuck in certain ways. But what you're saying is, let's not be so certain. Let's try to show up as ourselves, as authentic as we possibly can. And I think that's, even though I say a word like found, I absolutely do not mean I'm not seeking. but I can seek more from a foundation versus blowing in the wind or not having basic needs met. So then seeking becomes really human, the poetry of life, like when you were in your car ride with your friend, really can become beauty.
Yeah.
So that's what you're so I don't need to have science explain anything. Sure, would it be nice if it explains some cancer or other things that we grapple with, but being with just a really nice place to be.
Yeah. And having sat with gurus, and all of them have experienced the wise people, all of them have brought things to my life. And there's a way in which I believe in some beings having some interesting power and an ability to wake us up. And I also don't think any of them have the absolute answer. And I think that our habit of attaching ourselves to gurus, or to whether it's some kind of yogi guru, or whether it's a Joe Dispenza, or whatever, no one has the answers. And in fact, no one has the answers for you. They may have the answers for them, and you may resonate a little bit with what they're saying. I seem like the more, for me, the more I start to grip something that feels true. Okay, I'm going to start listening to these meditations, and it's really, then it starts to all slip through my hands, and you start to realize that well, there's a kernel of something in there, but I've got to stay true to my path.
Yes. Yeah. And as I've sat with many spiritual teachers, and as a therapist, I would like to say everybody has wisdom. Everybody, including our dogs, including our little nieces and nephew, including the sky, the strawberry moon has wisdom. Yeah. So have I learned from spiritual teachers or philosophers or psychology training or my own upbringing? Absolutely. And for me, I think that was part of the end of my seeking. I had to give up. It was going to be outside of me, that I was going to take something from the outside and digest it. And then I was going to have it inside. And so, and currently I gave up on seeking a partner, which was a trip because it came out of nowhere. That does not mean I don't have the desire. Felt like it ended. And if you can explain that, more power to you. My therapist doesn't understand it. My spiritual teacher friends don't really understand it, but it's a lived experience that this is my truth.
Yeah, maybe when we stop efforting so much, then maybe we can allow, and who knows what then happens. I love that you mentioned the sky too. We haven't really talked about nature as a teacher, and probably the greatest teacher. And I know in my own journey, if you've read my book, you know, at age 12, I had this kind of violent river accident happen where I was stranded on this submerged log, and it really shattered my connection with nature. And it's so ironic, or maybe it's not, maybe it was very purposeful in some way, that I ended up becoming this adventure writer who traveled to deserts and mountains and far off places and rivers, seeking to maybe heal that. But I'm now at this point in my life spending more time in nature than ever and finding that healing, because we are like, our genes are 98.9% ape, which I think is also funny about us trying to find hardcore answers to questions when we're crazy monkeys.
Yeah, and empty space. Crazy monkeys and empty space. That's a combo.
What do you mean empty space?
Well, we are,
Oh,
our
yeah.
whole
So
life. So,
atomic. Yeah.
yeah. And I wish more people had access to nature. We're so spoiled in Boulder, but a lot of people, what about the parks? What about your backyard or the down the street or the trees or just everything? There's so much magic and so much to learn.
Yeah. We
Um,
haven't talked about writing, but of course,
yeah.
writing has been one way that I've brought meaning to my life. Every time I start a story, it's an adventure, because I'm telling the facts and I'm telling honest accounts of things have happened to me. But whenever we tell a story, there's magic involved. It's like life isn't lived forward in a story, but when we look back on it, we can turn it into a story. And there's a little bit of a construct to that, but I just think it's less a construct and more just pure magic, because those stories then can move people and inspire people. Yeah.
We resonate. We all have our deepest longing seem to be similar, right? And so I'm not a storyteller. I'm not as good at telling a story. And it seems like my practice, my service to clients is my story.
You're
Yeah.
also an expert in the Enneagram. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're going to squeeze some of that in here. The Enneagram, explaining the Enneagram to people.
Yeah. So the Enneagram is an ancient wisdom tool map, and it basically illustrates how we all see reality in 9 ways. And then it gets much more complicated, but that's the simplicity. So we come in with a certain lens from I believe it's before birth, we come in with a certain lens or predilection. And then that is how we developmentally start shedding and opening and seeing. And so I use it with couples, fundamental. And then I've used it a lot with myself. So I'm going to have a little bit of a different walk than you.
Give an example. So I know you're a 4 and I'm a 6. So why don't you walk us through that, and also how that fit into seeking?
Yeah. So I wake up pretty much every morning with glasses half empty. That's just the way I wake up for the most part. What do I need to do? Get my dog taken care of? How many clients do I have? All these things. So the simplest thing for me, and I've been doing it lately, I wake up and I say, today is going to be an amazing day. That's not how I speak. And even that kind of sets me up a little more so that I don't constantly find what's missing, because that's what makes me really good as a therapist or as maybe a choreographer. So I don't know if you can feel that example.
For sure. Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
about you? How?
So I'm a 6, and my sort of Achilles heel is fear. And I've realized I oscillate between kind of being what they call a phobic 6 and being a counterphobic 6. So I could wake up and be full of fear and sit on my couch and start thinking and overthinking and worrying about stuff that happened. Or I can push against that and go out and go into nature and go for a hike and start a podcast, write a story and share it with the world. And those are ways I maybe manage that fear. And I think my whole seeking path is probably related to that part of me. There's kind of a push pull with fear in going to these crazy places I've been, up the Amazon and into Palestine. And there's a part of me that thinks I would never do that. And a part of me that looks back on all these things I've done and seen how much I've pushed against that. I don't know. What's your reflection of that?
Yeah, I love it. I almost picture a bridge. Can you stay on the bridge?
Say
No, so
more.
I have a lot of 6 friends. I'm thinking of one of my poker buddy friends who is very successful. And it's constantly one thing or another or that. And so I feel like we oscillate. Should I leave Vegas and move to wherever or not? Should I do this or that? Where some of us, that's not the propensity. So I guess if that,
I like that. And I think relating that to other people, not just people who might be 6s, but anyone who's listening to this, just to move out of the Enneagram for a minute, is I, here's something. A couple years ago, I went to see Michael Mead speak here in Boulder, and it was such an amazing talk. First of all, he's just such an amazing speaker, but he presented, that there's at least 2 kinds of spiritual paths, and one is the kind of the traditional path of meditating and contemplative stuff, but the other is creative people. And he unlocked for me this. I was caught in, should I be meditating or should I be writing? And finally realized that day that I need to be writing. And so where I'm going with this is doing. It sounds counterproductive. Sounds, oh, we should be doing less. We should be, some people teach that, and some people, they need that. I need to be doing and creating. If I'm not creating, I'm not happy. And I'm also not putting my life force into the world, and also missing opportunities for people to resonate. And maybe I want to be humble about it. I'm not teaching them. I'm hoping they resonate with something I say or find some meaning from the stories so
Yeah, as I listen, I'm thinking passive, active, those kinds of energies.
yeah,
I think as long as we're being, it sounds so cliche, but as long as we're being deeply true to ourselves and having guides to keep us and spiritual friends and whoever and nature to keep us true to ourselves, we're constantly creating.
yeah,
But I think when we get scared or traumatized, or I'm realizing lately that my conditioning of my upbringing is literally this close to me. So I have just a little peek through. And otherwise, I'm basically a little machine doing my thing.
yeah,
So I think for some of us need to be more, I need to be more passive. You might need to be more active. And this relates to dating, this relates to career. I'm always in front of everything. And can I just get either behind or with
yeah.
the world? Yeah.
How can a conversation, so in the next weeks, I'm going to be telling stories and having guests on like you. And how can something like this, talking about seeking, how can this help people? I want to know for me. So this is not just a project of some dude sharing his stories, and can also don't want to overstep and think that I can somehow just sit here, me talking on a podcast is going to help the world heal. But talk about that a little bit. How can something like this help people?
Yeah. So I think the word seeker implies that something's missing or that it has a spiritual, but I like that you outlined it. So I'm thinking of my brother right now, who you know, man would not resonate with the word seeker. Would he listen to your podcast? Absolutely. Because if we were to have him here right now, he would say, how could I make sure everyone in my life is safe? My daughters, my wife, me, our siblings. But then how can I get out and kite surf on the water? So
Mm,
that's his seeking, right?
yeah,
So I think you start with wherever anyone is. I could think of a ton of clients or friends or me. Start with where we are, and that's the seeking.
yeah,
So let's just be honest. So whoever you bring on, I'm sure a scientist will start from a different place. I'm sure a climate person will start from their place. Or I have a lot of friends right now who are taking sabbaticals or not working as much or retiring. That's a whole
yeah,
transition. Do we call it seeking? Sure. So I think just telling the truth, being authentic, and getting, I think is an interesting word because I pretend that I'm fine, all is well. But no, I'm seeking, yeah, seeking maybe a different way of living in Boulder and how to be less conditioned. I'm seeking to open to people that I might not otherwise date. There's so many things. I'm seeking maybe to write another something, poetry thing, whatever. And then I think something for me lately is serving. It's
mm.
less seeking and serving. And that helps me because that helps my seeking to serve, if that makes any sense.
I love that you mentioned courage. Years ago, when I was on my healing path, which I've written about in my memoir, Into the Soul of the World, I remember pulling out a whiteboard and writing the word courage and drawing a heart on it. And I did that because I knew that the root of courage, COUR, core, comes from a French word and is for heart. And when I think of courage, I don't think necessarily of just height, climbing the tallest mountains or walking on a tightrope. I think courage is connected to vulnerability in the heart. And I do think we're all on these different paths of moving through this physical world, but we're all on similar interior inner paths of almost seeking our own wholeness and our own heart in a way. And so I was recently posting something on Instagram, and I was looking for a song to put and when I was talking about this new podcast, and I was playing that song by The Who called The Seeker. And later in the song, he sings, I'm looking for me, you're looking for you. And I can't remember the line after that, but it's like, it's what we're all doing really, is just looking to feel more whole. And also, I think this fits in with what we talked about earlier, to become fully who we came here to be. When we finally shed as much of our conditioning and as much of the stuff that holds us back, we can become who we are meant to be. And that hopefully is a place of service.
Yeah, I think we started here. And yes, in spiritual terms, can we be found? Sure, if you want to use that language, or we keep seeking until we leave the planet. The language thing, but yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think I'm on the planet to help people be themselves. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
That's what gives me the most joy, the most fulfillment. And that's what we're both saying. You do it a different way. I do it a lot through clients, hopefully going to widen beyond that a little bit as I come into my wisdom years. So yeah. So
Yeah. This
yeah.
has been great, and we should wrap up. But the thing I'm really going to walk away with, one thing that I'm grateful for, is this idea of a bridge. Because I was thinking about, there's a bridge between seeking and finding. And if you stay in the middle of that bridge, you can be a seeker and you can be a finder and stay in balance. And so that's where I'm hoping that we go in this podcast. And I hope to have you on again. You've been such a good friend over the years. And Tamara and I meet for coffee a few times a week and have this conversation we're having right now. That's why I thought I'd bring her on and have this conversation today and see what came of it. And thank you for doing this, Tamara.
You are welcome. Yeah, it's fun. Really fun. And I hope it brings more questions and answers for people, for your listeners.
Thanks. And for those of you listening, I'll be returning every other week with a new podcast. And some weeks I'll tell a story from my seeking life, maybe something from the past, maybe something from last weekend. And I'll be unpacking it and then looking at what I've learned from it and maybe trying to understand, figure out how it might be relevant to you. And then other weeks I'll come on with a guest and talk about stuff like we're talking about today. So awesome. Thanks so much, Tamara. And we'll be seeing you around Boulder here soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Take
All right.
care.
Bye.